So, how do you actually stop Arsenal? If you attack them, you risk giving their forwards the space they want, but if you sit deeper and try to protect that space, Arsenal can push you back, take control of the ball, and keep the pressure coming. Press them high, and breaking just one line can open the field behind you. Refuse to press, and you may spend the next few minutes trapped inside your own half. That is what makes this Arsenal so difficult to deal with. Attacking them can be dangerous, but simply defending against them does not solve the problem either. So the real question is, what are you supposed to do? Because after years of falling just short, Arsenal have become more mature in defence, more connected through midfield, and increasingly efficient in attack. Those painful second-place finishes did not break this team. They taught it what was still missing. Arsenal spent years learning how to chase the best. Now, the rest may have to learn how to chase Arsenal. But Arsenal did not become this difficult to play against overnight. Before they could become the team everyone is watching now, they had to learn what it feels like to get close, to believe the title was within reach, and then watch it disappear. Finishing second hurts, but doing it more than once gives you something success cannot, a brutally clear picture of what is still missing. Arsenal learned that controlling a match is not enough if you cannot control its most dangerous moments. They learned that a brilliant starting 11 means less when injuries arrive, that possession means little if one transition can undo 90 minutes of work, and that a title race eventually exposes every weakness you tried to hide. Those seasons could have convinced Arsenal that they were simply not good enough. Instead, they became a map. Every failure showed Arteta another area that needed to become stronger, deeper, or more reliable. That is why the Arsenal we see now feels different. The disappointment did not disappear. It became part of the construction.
I'm a winner and I hate losing, and we lost something that we could win, and that's why I'm in pain. I'm sorry.
And this is where the transformation becomes easier to see. Arsenal did not respond to those disappointments by simply trying to score more goals. They became obsessed with making matches harder for the opponent to control. Their defensive strength is not only about what happens when Saliba or Gabriel wins a duel near the box. It begins much earlier, with where Arsenal keep the ball, where they lose it, and how quickly the players around that moment react. When possession disappears, the first objective is often to stop the counter-attack before it becomes a counter-attack. The midfield closes space, the defensive line protects what is behind it, and the opponent is forced to make another decision before they can attack freely. If that first pressure is beaten, there is still another layer waiting. This is what maturity looks like in a title contender. Arsenal are increasingly comfortable winning without allowing the match to become chaotic, because they have learned that the easiest chance to defend is the one the opponent never gets to create.
I think they are probably the best team defensively, not just in this country, but maybe in Europe right now.
But defending space is only one part of the problem, because Arsenal have also become much better at controlling what happens before the opponent can even think about attacking. This is where the midfield matters so much. Rice gives them power, recovery speed and protection, while the technical players around him can help Arsenal move through pressure without immediately turning every possession into a race towards goal. When those profiles connect properly, Arsenal can decide whether a match needs speed or patience. That changes the experience for the opponent completely. Press aggressively, and you have to accept the possibility that Arsenal will play through you and attack the space you have just abandoned. Stay deeper, and you allow them to establish possession higher up the pitch, move your block from side to side, and wait for an opening. The midfield is no longer just the bridge between defence and attack. It is becoming the place where Arsenal decide what kind of game you are allowed to play. And this is where being difficult to beat can start becoming something much more dangerous. For a long time, the question around Arsenal was whether their attack could consistently match the level of control and defensive security behind it. Now, the attacking picture is becoming more complete. Saka remains the obvious threat, but Arsenal do not want every important possession to end with one player being asked to create something extraordinary. The movements around him matter, the connections through midfield matter, and the presence of different attacking profiles gives Arteta more ways to change the question during a match. If an opponent sends extra protection towards one side, space has to appear somewhere else. If they protect the box with numbers, Arsenal can keep them there, recover second balls, and begin another attack before the defensive block has time to breathe. Then there are set pieces, where physical strength and preparation create another route to goal. Suddenly, sitting deep no longer feels like the safe answer. You may remove some space behind your defence, but you also invite Arsenal to spend more of the game around your penalty area. Now we can return to the question from the beginning, because this is where the Arsenal problem becomes clear. What exactly is the correct way to play against them? Commit numbers forward, and you increase your own attacking threat, but you also create the spaces Arsenal want when possession changes. Press high and you may disrupt their build-up, but if that pressure is broken, your defenders can suddenly find themselves protecting a much larger area. Drop into a compact block and those spaces disappear, but now Arsenal have territory, possession and time to keep asking the same question in different ways. Defend narrow and the width becomes available. Stretch wider to protect the wings and the spaces inside begin to grow. Even surviving open play does not completely solve it, because dead balls can turn one small mistake into the decisive moment. None of these ideas are automatically wrong. The problem is that every defensive answer comes with a price, and Arsenal are becoming better at recognizing which price you have chosen to pay. So why does all of this feel more important now? Because the individual pieces are no longer developing in isolation. The defenders have experienced title races together, the midfield understands more clearly what the structure needs, and the attacking players are learning where the next space will appear before it actually opens. Arteta has also had years to discover what this team looks like when one important player disappears, when an opponent refuses to press, when a lead has to be protected, or when a goal has to be forced against a crowded box. Those lessons matter because elite football eventually becomes a game of details. Arsenal have already experienced what happens when those details are not good enough. They have felt the pressure of chasing Manchester City. They have lived through the margins that separate first from second, and each disappointment has made the next version of the team more deliberate. What should concern the rest is not one new player or one tactical adjustment. It is that defence, midfield and attack are beginning to mature at the same time.
But the best team in England so far is Arsenal, the best team in Europe so far is Arsenal, because the numbers are there, the consistency they had.
Of course, almost impossible is not the same as impossible. Arsenal can still be beaten, and pretending otherwise would ignore the very lessons that brought them here. A high defensive line can still be attacked when the first pressure fails. Aggressive positioning can leave dangerous spaces when the timing is wrong, and a team that controls territory still has to turn that control into goals. Injuries can change combinations, individual mistakes can destroy the best structure, and the demands of competing across an entire season can expose weaknesses that one great performance cannot reveal. There will also be opponents capable of surviving Arsenal's pressure long enough to create the one moment that matters. The fortress has cracks. Every fortress does. What has changed is how difficult those cracks are becoming to reach, because an opponent may now have to survive Arsenal at one end before earning the opportunity to test them at the other. And that brings us back to the original question. How do you stop Arsenal? There is no single answer, because there is no single Arsenal problem anymore. Attack them, and you have to protect what you leave behind. Defend against them, and you may spend the match absorbing wave after wave of pressure. Press them, and you have to make sure the press is almost perfect. Refuse to press, and you give a more mature team the control it wants. None of this means Arsenal are guaranteed to win, and it certainly does not mean the work is finished. It means the margin for the opponent is getting smaller. Years of finishing just short forced Arsenal to confront their weaknesses one by one, and now those lessons are beginning to connect across the entire team. The defense protects the midfield controls the conditions, and the attack is becoming better at punishing whatever choice the opponent makes. Arsenal spent years trying to close the gap to the best. Now the question facing everyone else is much less comfortable. How many things do you have to get right just to beat them once?